Most arguments fail because they focus on winning the room rather than proving the point. When two opposing ideas collide, the instinct is to rely on emotional volume, but a structural alternative prioritizes internal consistency over a shouting match. In 399 BC, Socrates faced a trial for his life. His defense, recorded in Plato's Apology, provides a historical framework for building a case that relies on a specific sequence of logical steps. To apply this yourself, gather your materials, a pen, paper, or a digital document. Identify a specific personal conviction or a position you need to defend today. Following this four-part framework moves you away from the habits of a standard debater. You will act as a philosophical architect, building your argument on a foundation of verifiable facts. In the high-stakes environment of ancient Athens, a defendant was expected to perform theatrically to win over the jury. Socrates faced a court of 500 citizens who valued oratorical flair. Step 1 of this structure is to establish your baseline by drafting an opening statement that removes all flowery rhetoric. This diagram represents the common use of jargon and complex phrasing. Socrates rejected this, promising to speak using ordinary words. He believed the strength of his case lived in a single, direct line of truth, rather than the complexity of his speech. Write a single, hyper-focused sentence that states your position. Avoid defensive qualifiers or emotional filler. Starting with an unadorned statement disarms the audience. By refusing to perform, you force them to engage with the actual content of your argument from the first sentence. Step 2 focuses on identifying your opposition's deepest underlying biases. Socrates referred to these as his old accusers. Before addressing the formal charges, Socrates addressed decades of rumors that portrayed him as a dangerous thinker. He knew he had to dismantle these historical prejudices before any immediate logic could be heard. This chart shows how an argument functions like an iceberg. The visible tip is the current debate, but the massive underwater base represents root biases. If you leave these unaddressed, they will eventually sink your logical points. Look at your opening statement and write down the historical context or deeply rooted assumptions your opponent holds. Place this directly below your opening statement. Defeating the surface-level argument is ineffective if the foundational bias beneath it is allowed to remain intact. Step 3 introduces the elenchus, the core of the Socratic cross-examination. The goal of the elenchus is not to state that your opponent is wrong. Instead, you formulate direct questions that force their own logic to reveal its own contradictions. Socrates applied this when facing the charge of corrupting the youth. He asked his accuser Meletitus, who actually makes the young people better. Meletitus claimed that every citizen in Athens improved them, except Socrates. This visual equation illustrates the counter-argument. Socrates pointed out that with horses, a lone skilled trainer improves the animal, while a crowd of unskilled users corrupts it. Meletitus's claim required the jury to believe human education works in the exact opposite way. Socrates then pivoted to the charge of atheism. He used a logic flow chart to corner his accuser. Meletitus swore Socrates taught about daimonia, understood as gods or the children of gods. If you believe in children of gods, you must believe in gods. Meletitus's charge of total atheism became a logical impossibility. In your own outline, add a questioning section. Write out a sequence of if X, then how Y questions that test the internal consistency of your opponent's position. Victory occurs when you guide your opponent's own reasoning towards its own collapse. The final step is to draft a concluding statement that refuses to rely on emotional crutches. Socrates was 70 years old and facing the death penalty. These ruins remind us of the literal stakes of his trial, where the pressure to beg for his life was at its peak. It was standard practice for defendants to bring their weeping children before the jury to gain sympathy. Socrates had 3 sons, yet he refused to bring them forward, calling such theatrics a dishonor to the city. This split screen shows the difference between standard persuasion and a philosophical approach. Socrates argued that a judge's role is to give judgment based on the law, not to grant favors out of pity. Refusing to manipulate emotions is the final test of your argument. It ensures that any success is based entirely on the merits of your logic. Review the 4-part structure you have built: the opening statement, the teardown of historical bias, the logical cross-examination, and the closing based on integrity. Check your document one last time. Ensure that every bullet point you've written serves a logical function rather than an emotional one. By sticking to this structure, you occupy the role Socrates called the gadfly. He saw himself as a persistent spark intended to startle a sluggish city into examining its own life more clearly. Practice your outline out loud using your natural vocabulary. Once you've refined it, share the topic you chose to defend in the comments below.